mind the PG students. I took a topic that something that they could easily relate to. So this paper is titled "The Unliberated Reader: Rethinking the Nature of the Reader in the Reading Process." So if you're looking into the history of literary criticism, one thing we would notice is that literary criticism has almost always focused on the role of the author. Um, it was always about what an author should do, what an author should not do, how a text should be written. So, if you're looking into the ancient Greek and Roman period itself, uh, literary criticism, the philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, all of them were talking about the role of the author. When Plato banished the poets from his commonwealth, uh, years later, Aristotle he defended them on the grounds that they were performing a very noble and sacred act. So, literary criticism over the centuries, they have detailed on the role of the author. And then in the 19th century, towards the end of 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century, we had Freud's psychoanalytic theories, and all these psychoanalytic theories taught us how to analyze the book, how to analyze the text to know the deep inner world of the characters as well as the author. So, Freud's theories came up, and the question of the process of interpretation of a text was the crux of literary criticism since the beginning of 20th century. The text was analyzed, its content and form were analyzed, and with new criticism, the theories of T.S. Eliot, Clent Brooks. So, with new criticism, what happened is the author's biography, the author's intention, everything was ignored. It was seen as a kind of hindrance to the right interpretation of the text. So hereafter, the focus of literary criticism it shifted from the author to the text. The text was operated in various possible ways to reveal the Eurocentric attitude of the text, to raise the voice of the long oppressed subaltern group of peoples, and also to disclose the dynamics of power working behind the various discourses represented through literature. So, in the 20th century, as I said before, the focus of criticism shifted from the author to the text and then to the reader. With Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author. This is a very famous essay which was published in 1967, and it was this is something we are all very familiar with, where Barthes declares the death of the author. In this essay, he rejects the authority of the author in determining the meaning of the text. He concludes the essay like this, quote, "We must reverse its myth. The birth of the reader must be ransomed by the death of the author." Unquote. With these final words, the spotlight of literary criticism essentially shifted from the author to the reader. One can claim that this essay, The Death of the Author, led to the birth of the reader. The response of the reader mattered now. Reader response theories recognized the reader as an active agent who deciphered the true meaning of the text. The author has no authority over the meaning of the text. The text becomes alive only when the reader actively engages with the words printed on the pages of the book. In other words, it was the reader who recreated the text and hence had authority over the meanings of the text. So what Barth did in his essay was that till then the author had a prominent role in literary criticism. Like author was the center point, and he reduced this prominence of the author to the status of a mere scripter who had no further role in determining the meaning. So Barth posits that the origin of the meaning lies in the language of the text and the impressions it creates on the readers. Bringing in the intentions of the author is, in fact, a way of imposing a limit on the freedom of the reader and also on the text. The meaning of the text depends on the personal preferences and cultural choices of the reader. Thus, it will be highly subjective, highly specific, and unique to the reader. This would apparently mean that the reader is now completely liberated from the imposition of the author and thus can come up with multiple meanings which are independent of the passions and tastes of the author, which means the reader has limitless freedom in bringing up any unique meaning. But one thing with Roland Barthes' essay was that uh, he does not explain how exactly the reader will be, what kind of an entity the reader will be. Another thing is, the reader. He does not elaborate much on the reading process also. Uh, and then one contradiction that we would notice in the essay is that even though Bhartas is declaring the depth of the author, elsewhere in the essay he says that the author absents himself. So, so he says that the author absents himself. So the later reader response theorists like Wolfgang Eiser, then Stanley Fish, all had certain disagreements with Barth. And when Barth says that the author absents himself, it seems that the author is not completely vanishing from the text, but it seems that the author steps aside from the prominent position once held for influencing the process of interpretation. So, um, then later in 1972, Wolfgang Iser published this essay, The Reading Process, a Phenomenological Approach. And in this essay, Iser observes that in every text, there are certain written parts, which we see on the page, and there are certain unwritten parts. He calls these gaps. So he says that these gaps are actually left to the reader it is left to the reader's imagination to fulfill. So the meaning that the reader gives, it's completely upon dependent upon the reader, what kind of meaning they come up with in terms in these unwritten parts. So however, it is understood that the gaps in a text are left to the reader to fulfill. However, this does not leave the reader free to run their imagination in a desired way. Iser observes that the written parts of a text, quote, imposes certain limits on its unwritten implications. This reveals that the text is capable of directing the reader to certain meanings that goes well with it. So we have to rethink the free status of the reader, which means we have to reconsider what Barthes has said in his concluding lines. Mm, the influence of the text, which acts as the reference for any meaning deciphered by the reader, is of much importance to the interpretations that they come up with. The reader would always look into the text for supporting his or her arguments. And then later in 1980, Stanley Fish published this essay, Is There a Text in This Class? So in this essay, he illustrates how the readers tend to interpret the text and decipher the meanings based on the circumstances in which they are placed. So the text is a kind of a particular discourse that is provided to the reader, and the reader, when we are choosing to open the book and read, we are naturally placed in this pre-structured situation of the text. So this would imply that the meanings deciphered from a text are not usually imposed upon by the reader exclusively. They are based on the institutional structure within which one hears the utterance, unquote. This means that the influence of the text is such that the meanings deciphered from it by the reader is always restricted within the particular framework designed by the author. Um, though the reader is now apparently empowered to work out his or her own imagination, the text sets the background for the process of deciphering meaning. The background set through the text imposes an authoritative control over the reader's imagination. The reader would be frequently pulled back from deviating to other meanings and is thereby restricted by the text. The text has, so it is evident that the text has a major role in guiding the reader to certain intended meanings. The text can guide, control, and even manipulate the reader to certain meanings. So again, it is we get the feeling that reader is not as much as free as it first appears to be. And then another thing is, when we are choosing to read a book, one thing that we all do is, this term is very much familiar to all of us, willing suspension of disbelief. So, in this, what happens is that the reader will have to, when we are reading something, will suspend our own ideas, our own attitudes to experience this unfamiliar world of the text. So, and only then we can absorb this text, either consciously or unconsciously. Only then we can absorb this text. It is at this stage of identification with the text that the author can stipulate certain attitudes in the reader. With identification, the reader is actually internalizing the author's thoughts and ideas at some time during the process of reading and interpretation. Besides the reader's subjectivities, it is based on these internalized thoughts and ideas as well as the suggestions and clues from the text, which again is from the author, that the reader deciphers the meaning of the text. As Stanley Fish says in his essay, quote, communication occurs within situations, and that to be in a situation, it is that to be in a situation is already to be in possession of or to be possessed by a structure of assumptions of practices understood to be relevant in relation to purposes and goals that are already in place. And it is within the assumptions of these purposes and goals that any utterance is immediately heard. Unquote. Here, the reader would prefer to work out the meanings that are highly relevant to the clues in the text. When we identify with something, what actually happens is that someone else's idea, in this case, the author's idea, are taking a form in our consciousness. However, this formulation takes place, this formulation of idea takes place based on the terms set by the author, whose thoughts are the essence of our reading. So, whatever interpretation that the reader comes up with is not exactly based on the reader's own inclinations. The author's thoughts and ideas, which was internalized while subjecting him or herself into the universe of the text, interferes with the reader's orientation. So, one thing that we have to admit is that a complete liberation of the reader is neither possible nor advisable, because this would mean that the reader could go way out of the line and come up with any kind of interpretation which can in no way be related to the text. This is not something acceptable. So, the text does always exercises some control over the reader. Both the reader and the text are equally important in deciphering a proper, acceptable meaning to the text. The subjectivity of the reader does play a major role, but as stated above, the text controls and manipulates the responses of the reader and draws the reader to a particular interpretations that are originally designed by the author. The text, in fact, becomes a tool used by the author to present his or her intended meaning. The reader, through the process of reading, makes use of this tool to decipher the meaning. The text is, however, such a tool that is capable of leading the reader to certain interpretations by correcting the reader's understandings, which may have deviated to various other directions due to the reader's particular subjectivities. The reader is thus dependent on the text to develop a meaning, how much ever the meaning is his or her own. Using the text as a tool, the author controls and manipulates the reader to certain interpretations. In other words, the author continues to pull the strings. This also reveals that the reader thus born is not any active reader, but of a particular kind. Being already placed in the pre-structured universe of the author's text, the reader follows the author's directions to a great extent to decipher meanings out of the text. In the process of reading, the reader is actually put in such a position where he or she can neither completely accept nor completely reject the author's influence. In a nutshell, we may say that the reader is an entity that is constantly subjected to covert influence and control by the author through the text. The reader is therefore only partially liberated. However, it continues to remain loyal to the text and implicitly to the author, which is necessary to achieve an acceptable meaning from it. So we would say that Roland Barthes' title, The Depth of the Author, and his concluding lines, the depth of the author is inevitable for the birth of the reader. Um, it's quite, I would say it's quite misleading, because depth, as it does not occur, the author is not completely vanishing from the text. The author still continues to pull the strings, and the reader is not a liberated one, but only partially liberated, and still continues to remain loyal to the text and the author indirectly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sapphire. I'm sure, being readers, we all have something to contribute to her postulation. So let's have a discussion. You can raise your questions and comments.
Okay, Sapphire. Yeah,
Yeah.
please. Question coming up.
Yeah, okay. Am I audible? I'm just wondering. Am I
Yes,
audible?
ma'am. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am, very well. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Sharif, if you want to ask, please go ahead. I
Yeah,
had some trouble
go ahead,
in.
go ahead,
Okay, no, it's just that
please.
good to see you, Sapphire, after such a long time
Yeah.
back in the department, though virtually, of course. I just wanted to ask you this because I think I taught the role of the reader by Wolfgang Iser in the class, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. Yes,
Yes.
so I think
Correct.
I was just thinking when Roland Barthes wrote The Death of an Author, he doesn't mean it literally anyway. It is not literally the author vanishing from that space. And again, the reader is not the biological reader at all. This many critics have already, threadbare discussed this. The reader is a destination of the text, of many discourses converging in a particular space. The reader is more of a metaphor rather than to be taken literally. And as you rightly put it, the reader is not, I don't know whether we can call it loyalty to the text, or there is a way in which the text kind of limits the way you can exercise your freedom. Like, for instance, Wolfgang Iser says that you cannot completely go beyond the possibilities of the text and suggest something very preposterous, out of the way completely. You cannot do that, right? There is a world. The text has a world from which you make your meanings. So this is something which within the reader response criticism itself people have come up with.
Yes.
I don't think anybody took Barthes in that Roland Barthes argument in a very literal way to say that the author is completely dead in that way. At the same time, we cannot, this is what I feel, we cannot completely refute the contribution made by Barthes. It gave a lot of freedom. And it was
Mhm.
and we also have to historicize that moment, This is in the late 60s when all kinds of authorities were being questioned in France, that this particular essay also comes into the public sphere. Catherine Belsey has brilliantly historicized this particular essay in her. I forget, we teach it in the research methodology. I'll get you the title of the essay a little later. I'm not able to recall it right now. But she says we have to understand it within this particular essay and its appearance in the public sphere of France. We have to situate it within the May 1968 revolution that took place in France. So it's very important to historicize this also, to understand, because it was not, I feel Barthes was not just talking about literature alone. He was talking about calling into question all kinds of authorities. That's where I think you have to see it. I feel we will lose sight of the political implications of the essay if we don't factor in Foucault's essay, What is an Author, also in this particular context. So there is something in the French political atmosphere that is actually questioning the notion of authority that is inherent in the figure of the author. Even the words have a similarity, right? Author, authority. Author comes from authority. So who holds? Author was a kind of a figure that organized the meaning of a text, saying that I determined the meaning of the text. So it was that kind of a control that was being questioned. Can we completely negate the importance of that moment? I'm not sure. I'm not saying you said it, but I'm saying, can we really undermine it completely? That's my, doubt. Yeah.
No, no, we cannot undermine. As you said, I agree with it that mm, this essay has certain importance. Like you said, it was a very historical moment. Yes, but the point is that when we were studying the essay, and then when I read it, it gets the feeling that it gives the feeling that authority. The author has no authority at all. The author has no say in the meaning. We need not look into the author anymore. That's a kind of feeling that we get. But that's not how it is. Even later, I haven't mentioned in my paper, but later when psychoanalytic reader response theories came up, especially with Norman Holland, all of them were saying that uh, this when you're writing something, you have certain central fantasies working, and it is these fantasies that are transformed in some way and put on the paper. So there is this authority, though it is not we may not directly acknowledge it, but this authority is there. That is not എന്താ പറയുക മൊത്തമായിട്ട് ഇല്ലാണ്ടാവുന്നില്ല. It is there, and we have to be aware of it. നമ്മള് reader is completely free to now. The author has no authority is not right. That is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
But
that's a
yes,
very interesting point when you say that the so-called absolute liberty of the reader. I completely agree with you. It's a myth. That doesn't exist. I mean, the reader's freedom is not that you can interpret whatever you feel like. Definitely, you are bound by the text. But at the same time, I think it also redefined the notion of the author. Author notion, authority-ആയിട്ട് വേറെ രീതിയിലാണ് ഇനി relate ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ നമുക്ക്. You can't go back. See, again, when we are actually doing literature, we don't, no longer are we bothered. Are we really bothered? What did Wordsworth have in mind then? Who's bothered now?
No.
That is what I'm saying.
No.
So in that way, the author has been redefined and reshaped. That's what I was trying to say. Anyway, thank you. It's a very interesting thought. Thank you, Sapphire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
There are people bustling with questions. Yes. Yeah. More. Yeah. People who are very conscious of this issue. Reading. Yes. Okay, so let me put in a couple of things. When we talk about reader response, we assume a number of things. One is that you can read the text, possibly. I mean,
I can't hear you, sir.
yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes. Now it's clear.
Okay, one assumption is that you can read the entire set of intentions of the author in the text. Okay, this is one assumption. Okay, and this is made problematic by the fact that unless you have a, let us say, a 100% awareness about the historical context in which the text was produced, okay, as well as the author's own interventions in the context. What physicists would say, the kind of curvature made by the author. There's a straight line. There's a straight path of light in which an object makes a slight curvature by intervening. So this kind of thing. The author's intervention which makes a curvature in history. Okay, kind of wrinkle, so to speak. If you are thinking of a fabric, okay, the author can be taken as a wrinkle in the fabric. So what exactly is this? Okay, this is a question. So for instance, when you talk about Kumar Nashan's poetry, you wonder why there are no descriptions of the interiors of temples, idols, although he has written certain poems about devotional poets, whereas there are plenty of such references in other poets of his time. So somebody made this very caustic observation. This is because he couldn't enter a temple in his lifetime. So this kind of analysis which takes history on board. This is one thing. Okay. Two, when we talk about the reader, again, I think Dr. Janaki pointed out this. See, you assume a certain kind of complete reader, Okay, a certain kind of, let us say, wholesome reader. So this is also not possible for a number of reasons. One is that the reader is also operating so independently as we think. See, the reader is subject to a number of influences from his environment,
Yes.
a lot of things. So what you generally think as the readers speak, so to speak, is not exactly the reader speaking. The reader is speaking quite, I mean, obviously from the point of view of his time. Okay, so it's not a reader, strictly speaking, a reader's response, but partially the response of the times. Okay, so when I am not personally, it's not a person called Sharif who's speaking, but Sharif speaking given to him from history, what is given to him from the environment. So these two things. Okay. One, the reader is not independent. The writer is also not independent. And the reader's reading can be read again by somebody else. This is what happens when you review critical works. When you review somebody else's reading, okay, over a long period of time. So the whole issue becomes complicated. And one is, and of course, there is another thing called agency. When the writer writes, is it the writer who writes text out of his own free will? One. Two, you take a film called, what is that? Birth of a Nation. Okay, Griffith. Otherwise, a very good filmmaker, but racist to the core. Yeah, if you have seen the film. So it has been traced as a very technically perfect film. Okay, all right. But Griffith here is speaking for a particular constituency, Protestant, white, northern, southern, I mean. So the whole issue gets complicated. Both the writing and the reading processes get complicated. So generally, I think quite often we have a very simplistic kind of reading of the two things, writing and reading. So unless you bring in all these things, then when you bring in all these things, actually, this binary disappears. Okay, so neither is the author dead, nor his times dead, I mean, the reader is not born here. He has been around for a long time. Okay, what you see here is just a flash from the reader, which itself is determined by a number of factors. So I think as students of literature, as uh, as people who have been looking at these things for a long time, I think we should refine these kinds of arguments that come up before us. Okay, did I take too much time? Sorry for that. Right.
Um, I do agree with it because there is this thing like it's like whatever the writer is writing, the writer is uh, whatever the writer is writing, his times, his history, everything does matter. Because as I said before with Janagi ma'am, everything is actually coming from the like when we're reading psychoanalytic theories, everything comes from the id, and there are certain central play a role, and what it is these fantasies that are being projected out, but they are transformed so that that is acceptable by the society, even by the person themselves. So that is why the time, the history, everything starts interfering there. That is why we see the we can get the elements of when you said about Kumaran Ashan or other people, they are because this I would say the super ego or the ego interferes. The desires of the it cannot be as such expressed. So the author is not completely what free in that sense. Even in the case of reader also it is there. um, In an essay I have read again in an essay of Norman Holland. Norman Holland he says that I can't remember the title of the essay. In that essay, he says that uh, certain central fantasies are being projected by the writer, and these central fantasies are being recognized by the reader's psyche. So if you're writing something and I am reading it, my psyche can recognize these central fantasies. And these so as far as the fantasies are quite രണ്ടും ഒത്തു പോകുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ uh, the reader is quite comfortable with the text. And if it does not go, if this central fantasy within the reader is not uh, and then a comfortable if the reader is not comfortable with the central fantasy is not comfortable, it causes certain disturbances for the reader. That is why we find the book quite boring, or we have certain disagreements with it. So here in this case also the reader is not completely born in that sense. We are restricted as reader and we are restricted as writer also. There are certain other forces in a psychoanalysis. It is said like that. This is what this was a theory that Norman Holland said. I think he later explained this in elaborate in much more detail in his book, The Dynamics of Literary Response. So, as you said, sir, the reader is partially liberated, not liberated. The writer is actually not completely free. The reader is not really born in that sense. Yes, am I clear?
Okay. Yes, more questions?
More questions? You can also write your questions
Yeah.
in the chat box. Safar, since there are no more questions, let me ask a very random question, just in case it furthers the discussion. So, how do you think the process of reading it varies from genre to genre, or how the different genres? I mean, is there what is the difference between how the different genres limit or widen the scopes of reading?
Honestly, I can't say much about this genre to genre. But one thing that I feel is that as when we are choosing to read a book, we are actually placing ourselves in that discourse, in that particular what do you call it, the structure of that book. So when you're reading a book like a science fiction, our mind is like already prepared to read some kind of science, some like if it is Frankenstein, we already know that this is a kind of science. This is a science fiction, so we will be expecting certain things like that. And if we are reading a fantasy literature, we already know that whatever written in this, it's all about magic, supernatural things. So our mind will be kind of prepared for that. So in that sense, there might be some changes if we are aware of the genre. We might be there might be some changes. I don't know exactly how. I am not knowledgeable enough to elaborate on that, but yes, there will be changes.
Yeah, thank you, Safar. More questions?
If there are no more questions, shall we wind up, Asha?
Yeah, I think, sir, we have few audience now, so I think we should be winding up.
Okay.
Safar, shall we wrap it up? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, so Safar, thank you for being back to the department. Thank you for your interest in paper and your time. Now, thank you, teachers, scholars, and the students for turning up and raising the questions, making comments. So, thank you, everyone. Until we meet again next week. See you all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Safar.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Safar. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.